Hey everybody, and welcome to the weekly top 10 list. Thank you for supporting the channel and getting access to this member content. We always love doing it. This is a special week because Francesca is off, doing her honeymoon and everything. So she'll be back for next Monday, but for today, I'm going to be doing it solo. And in fact, I wanted to do a top 10 list that would synergize with the 20th anniversary of TYT, which just happened just a couple of weeks ago. We had a little get-together, a special event looking back on the first 2 decades of TYT, for which I've been here for almost exactly half of it, actually. I've been here for 10 years, and it may be a little bit nostalgic, and I wanted to look back on a couple of the points along the way. Now, when I say top 10, moments or memories for TYT, some of them are very specific, like one specific thing. Some of them are a little bit broader. So, with that said, here are 10. My number 10 is going to be, I'm going to say the launching of Think Tank. Now, many of you watching The Damage Report may not be familiar with Think Tank, but before I hosted The Damage Report, I hosted a show called Think Tank, which that channel is now the watch list, actually. But what it was like an infotainment channel where every day, myself and mostly my co-host, Hannah Cranston at the time, we would just do videos about things that interested us, fun, educationally things. They weren't super newsy or anything like that. And that channel came about from a channel called TYT University, which was sort of about like college news. When we reconfigured it into Think Tank, I was just so excited for it. We created this new set, which was in my apartment, actually. And just the prospect of being able to start a new thing with a whole new graphics package and make it whatever we want was so exciting. We kept it under wraps while we were working on it for like 2 months beforehand. It was a very exciting time. And we had a lot of great memories from Think Tank as well. But that's one that definitely stands out for me. Number 9 is going to be my first politicon. The reason this stands out as a memory was politicon is kind of, for someone in my career field, what I imagine like Comic-Con is if you're in a big like nerdy movie or TV show. Like, you are suddenly presented with a lot of people that are really into the same thing as you. And we get to come across, viewers of the show, fans of the show in a lot of different contexts. We've had special events and stuff like that. But politicon was just this mass group of people who are very likely to get our references, to know who we are. It was just awesome to feel like you're surrounded by people who care about the same things you care about. Like, not everyone did. Some of them were right-wingers or whatever. And there were a lot of bad people there, too. But, oh, there's a helicopter. I don't know, it felt real. Like, doing this job can feel a little bit disconnected. There's 2 helicopters, actually. And being at politicon and being surrounded by political art and political panels and everything and live shows was just a very cool experience. My number 8 is going to be something that almost none of you will have seen because it happened so long ago. This was just a couple of months into me working at TYT back in 2012. It was the filming of the training montage that I did with Anna Kasparian. So, if you're not familiar with this, it was for an arm wrestling contest that we were doing as a part of TYT. And so what we did was, on the weekend, Anna and I went up to Runyon Canyon, which is a hiking place, and we filmed different shots that we put together with Rocky music into her training for a big contest. And it was just so much fun. Like, it was early enough on in me working at TYT that the fact that I was interacting with Anna Kasparian, and on a weekend, no less, was very surreal anyway. And we just created this fun thing that we conceptualized together, and we used it to, like, get people hyped for her match. That was just a really fun thing. Like, I felt very, like, accepted by TYT at that point because we were doing something like this, and it was so early on that it was important to me. I didn't know a lot of people in LA at that point. So that was a great experience. It's still available on the Young Turks channel, by the way. If you look up Anna Kasparian and Misty Kingma, you might come across it there, or Anna training arm wrestling, maybe. It was just a lot of fun. Actually, when I get finished with this, I'm going to watch that video again. My next is going to be that arm wrestling competition, actually. So doing the training montage was fun, but doing all the matches and the filming around it was great, too. It was sort of the first thing that wasn't explicitly political that I felt brought us together as a company in the time that I had been working there. In the future, there would be tons of things that actually probably deserve positions on this list, like filming the Game of Thrones reviews and stuff like that, or doing our Super Bowl event and everything. Like, we've done a lot of fun events. But doing the arm wrestling, it took a few weeks, and it would be a big deal when a match was about to happen. It would happen right in the middle of where everyone worked and everything. We got super hyped for it. It was just a fun thing. And, like, it was like Rick Strom was so into it and everything. Those videos, I think, are still up on the Young Turks, or maybe they were probably TYT Sports, actually, as well. I think Michael hurt his arm. It was a lot of fun doing something that wasn't political. A lot of these are going to be like that. They're things that aren't explicitly political, because the politics is like, that's our duty, our responsibility, and we very much enjoy it. But it is great to be able to do something different. You know, that sort of stands out. And so the arm wrestling contest did. Number, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So number 5, I think, I'm going to put Trump losing in 2020. So our election coverage in 2020 stands out to me. A case could be made that the 2016, in a bad way, stands out too, but this was more of a happy memory. 2020 was a very dark year, you might recall. It was dark with the pandemic. It was dark in that we had been coming off of years of Trump at that point. There was a lot of reason to be really pessimistic. And even coming out of it, there would be a lot of reasons to be pessimistic. But him losing, and like, you know, we accepted it at that point because we can accept reality, unlike him. That gave me a little bit of hope and faith back in what can happen. That you can have someone who is so awful that they do get booted out of office. It happens so rarely, but it can happen. It is very rare, and it was still so close. Like, none of these memories are necessarily 100% pure. But being together as a group, we were back in studio, at least for a limited time. Some of us were able to see each other in person, which hadn't really happened for months at that point. And we got some good news. And so that stands out to me. Like, most of the election coverages stand out. I remember the first ones that I did, but we needed that win. We needed to get rid of Trump for a bit. And thank God. I mean, imagine Ketanji Brown Jackson, like, would be Judge Jeanine Pirro or something. So that was great. Number 4 is going to be, I wanted to do one out of True North, because getting the experience to go to the Arctic and film my climate change docuseries True North was one of the greatest experiences of my whole life. But I'm going to focus on being on polar bear guard duty. So if you haven't seen the show, we were camping next to a glacier, far away from any civilization, and there were polar bears around. There were polar bear tracks actually right outside of our camp. And so during the night, we had to do a watch, like you do in fantasy novels. And one of us had to be awake at all times to watch out for polar bears. And so I got to do that. It's not on this list because it's a happy memory, except maybe in hindsight. It was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, if not the most terrifying. But it stands out, like being camped out near the North Pole, right next to a glacier, and polar bears might just rampage into your camp at any moment. That really stands out, and I would not have had that experience if not for TYT and for, you know, Steve-O and Verizon and all that for setting up that show. That was an experience. There was a lot of great experiences on that trip. One of the best meals of my lifetime, getting close with Shavala, who was my co-host at the time, just seeing a part of the world that I've never seen and I'm sure I'll never see again. Like, it's the weird thing where, like, I know I could go back to Svalbard in theory, but I probably never will. There's so many great places to see, but this was a brief experience where for a couple of months, I got to really experience this different culture, this different part of the world. And that stands out to me. My number 3 is, it's going to seem ridiculous in comparison to Trump losing, but it's AOC winning, honestly, was a huge moment. Not only because it was one of the most purely joyful moments on the show. Jank and I, if you don't recall, we cover every election. Like, literally tomorrow night, I'm going to be covering an election with Trump. We cover all, with Jank. We cover all of these. And in 2018, we'd been doing night after night after night of this coverage. And it was kind of dark times. Like, and bear in mind, we had the 2016 election. We'd had the great experience of Bernie getting super high profile. But remember, he hadn't won. So, like, this is before, there were a few Justice Democrats who had already been representatives at that point, But this was a progressive winning, a young progressive who speaks the way we do about politics, winning in a primary against a strong, financially backed Democrat, and beating them and winning. And we got to experience that together in this election coverage of her coming from behind. I was super hyped for it. I had just gotten to interview her the day before, and never would get to speak to her again. And so that was just a great experience, her winning and showing that they could, and a lot of other great Justice Democrats and other Democrats won in the wake of it. But that was like the first of the big ones. And I guess every election coverage now, I am just chasing that high again in a very real way. Number two, actually now I'm thinking maybe should be like number 3 or 4 or 5. But it was the chance to cover the DNC and the RNC. I'm going to put those two memories together because a lot of the experience blurs together. We got to go as a group amidst all this media, and TYT was there covering both of those events. And there were certainly some standout memories like the confrontation with Alex Jones and stuff, but we got to be there on the floor in 2016 and wondering what was going to happen and just covering it together. Like, it was a lot of these are moments where I felt like we were really together, and we got to be there. Now there's a special reason that this is on there because I believe it was the DNC in 2016. I reconnected with an ex of mine who is now my wife. And so if I hadn't gone to that event, God only knows what the state of my life would be. I might not be married right now. So both politically in terms of our solidarity as TYT and progressives in a difficult time, notably, Bernie hadn't won. These were rough times in 2016, but we were together, and that made it, bearable. And then of course, getting to meet the woman who would become my wife was a great experience. Number one is going to be, though, it's the most consequential, I guess, even to this day. Maybe at some point it won't be, but for now it really is. And that was entering into the pandemic together. So that was the beginning of quarantine, the beginning of lockdown. So we get like a day's notice, like, hey, you should probably look into like, what would it take to shoot from home, just in case, because there might be like a lockdown for a week or whatever. And then everything. And look, this is not one of the happy memories, except in a bittersweet way. Like, I really felt like the community grew tighter together, in 2020. Like, we were up against so much, obviously with the pandemic, but politically too. Like the possibility that Trump could be reelected. We were being hit by horrible news every day. And now everything was changed. The whole way that we interact with each other and do the show, all of the shows on the network, was changed. And yet we didn't break, like as a community or as a show or a network. We didn't break. We adapted to it. And I think, we're like things got bigger and better in some ways. We're still kind of in the pandemic and we went through a hell of a lot of terrible things along the way. But at least we did have each other. Like, we would give updates every day on the state of COVID, and we'd get heads up from like people in the community of what they were going through. If their relatives got sick or, tragically died, like I had to go through a version of that myself with one of my relatives. And it was really bad no matter what, but it could have been even worse, except that we had each other. And this is one of the memories where I would love for us to move on from it. I would love for everything to be back to normal, but there will never be a point when I will not look back on what it was like to go through that. It was such a consequential thing, one of the most consequential times, I think, in all of our lives. And we were able to adapt, and we were able to support each other, and we were able to get through it. It's not the happiest memory on this list. In fact, it might be one of the least happy. But we did it together, and it's still having an effect to this day. And look, there are so many things that could be on this list. I feel bad just for everything that I put on here is something that should have been here, and maybe I'll do more at some point. But I'm in a nostalgic sort of period, like thinking back on my time at TYT, and I don't know, it just feels nice to focus on a few of the things along the way. Depending on how long you've been watching, you might be familiar, you might not be familiar with some of these events, but these are the things that sort of color the way I approach the news and approach TYT, as having been through these incidents. And all this has happened in the last 10 years. God only knows what'll happen in the next 10. But I want to thank you for supporting the network, supporting the show, being a member, and making it possible for us to do this special content. We really, really do appreciate it. We hope that you enjoy it. If you have any ideas for top 10 lists, you can post them in the comments below, and I will see you next time.